I'm going to preface this as a conversation with a conservative. Now, a lot of the information that the conservative political pundits, like MPs and MPPs and conservative influencers, comes from X, used to be called Twitter. Now, what you have to understand about this format is there are other influencers. And you say, what do you mean by other influence? Well, let's take a look right here. Here you have, I don't have a premium account on X. I'm not dialed in like everybody is on X. I just do research from various platforms. So this girl has posted, X has changed their policy, and now you can see where the accounts are based. Here's an influencer from Texas called Mary Tiles Texas at Mary Tiles Texas. Date joined September 2022 in Russia. Account based in Russia. Verified since September 2023. 3 username changes. Last one was on May 2024. And connected via the Russia App Store. Ironically enough, in the interim between Trump 45 and Trump 47, a guy by the name of Elon Musk and Donald Trump were at Mar-a-Lago on a regular basis making phone calls to Vladimir Putin, Mr. Putin himself. So there's an interesting thing that's been going. We can't read their minds what they discussed, but it has been proven because they represented that they did make and have these discussions. So now we have here Michelle L.A. She's got 30,000 views, 1,000 looks like reposts. I'm not familiar with the symbols at the bottom. I should be. 3.5 thousand hearts and 229 comments. So she's got a picture there. I am a Canadian. I do not support the Liberals. Liberals do not represent my views. I do not support net zero. Well, it's a free world, free speech. You can say what you want. So now the text above that states, first line, we need much less government. Now, this has been neoliberalist. Don't get hung up on the word liberalist because that deals with conservative ideology, believe it or not. I know it's just backwards, but it's the yin-yang of the universe in a convoluted and obsequious type of way. So they say we need much less government. And this was originally started and pushed strongly by Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan and every conservative government thereafter, as well as other governments as well, because that was the consciousness of the public, because that's what they bought into and believed also, so they are intertwined. Now, if you need much less government, why would you need much less government? Because you're constantly growing. It's part of the natural rhythm of the universe is to expand. And, if planet Earth is just a microcosm of the universe, then we are expanding also. And, you have to understand that capitalism is based on constantly expanding. It's really that simple an explanation for how things are. So now we have 41 million people in Canada. So what was it, maybe 15, 20 years ago? We had 30 million. So don't quote me on what we had 30 years ago, but I'm just saying, or 20 years ago, I'm saying approximately 30 million, 34 million, or thereabouts. So now, taking into account that fact, if you've increased your population by a factor of 30%, why would you reduce government services? Wouldn't you be increasing them to provide a balanced service for everyone? So we have to look at it the bigger picture here. Government provides services for people. It also provides being an intermediary between the public for services and various other things, because taxes, etc., and pension funds and various other factors. So you need more, not less. And anybody that thinks AI is going to solve the problem, well, guess what? Historically, the fax machine didn't wipe out business, certain aspects of business. It was just a complement. Once you understand that all these are complements, same with the computer. The human being decided the computer could think for them, but no. The human derived truths that were not computable, so that was a misnomer. Now, for whatever reason, AI, everybody thinks is going to be the cure-all for everything. And let's set you up for what reality is going to end up being. That's not the way it's going to work. It's basically running on a base 2 platform and is dependent upon a database. So unless the database, which is constantly being updated, so that creates that, but it cannot think outside of that database. It cannot formulate anything outside of its substrate creation. And so the intention of the human behind the programming of the database and the operation and how the coordination of the flow and parsing of data within AI will dictate the results. But to think you're going to get a real human back and forth with AI is a false narrative. It may give you the sense of that, but once you start believing that and it's a false sense, it's just a false universe you're creating. So once we understand AI is to help complement what we're doing to make things better and streamline things better and make things better for everyone, then we'll be much further ahead. So we need much less government. Now, the second line is much less immigration. And you think, well, that's been a mantra of every government pretty much around the world lately, especially since after COVID. And it really does not make sense here in Canada. I don't think it makes sense anywhere in the world. Nonetheless, let's just focus on Canada right now. Much less immigration. And that's just really nonsensical. It makes no sense whatsoever. And you're holding on to and making an argument in this belief system created on that. If you look at the landmass of Canada, the landmass of Canada is larger than the United States. The United States is 341 million people, thereabouts, and that's pretty much a de facto figure. And Canada's 41 million, and that's pretty much a de facto figure as well. So if the landmass of Canada, which is factual, it's the second largest in the world, and more so than the United States of America, why would you need much less immigration? You're not producing like rabbits. You're human beings. You're not rabbits. This is not the thing where we sent rabbits, or the British Empire sent rabbits to Australia, and they had an explosion of rabbits everywhere. So this is another nonsensical non sequitur. It makes no sense whatsoever. And then much less taxes. Well, taxes is a different thing. Once we understand we need to structure the framework of the economy differently from the way it has operated under this neoliberalist way of thinking. So I'm going to give you a recent example. This guy, Pierre Poilievre, during the 2025 Prime Minister election, it used to be the mantra, carbon tax Trudeau, carbon tax Trudeau. Well, anyway, so a guy by the name of Mark Carney came along, and what he did was zero-rated the consumer carbon tax. And guess what happened? It didn't make Canadians rich. It did not make Canadians rich. It did not change the affordability issue, because that's not the root of the problem. But everybody creates all this noise, and you think it's not the root of the problem. So that's tied into much less tax. And here is the Shakespearean side of the much less taxes. Consumer carbon tax, 0 rated. I think it's right off the books in law now. And within a couple months, because of inflation, that's another thing we got to tackle, which is a lot that people do not understand. Inflation wiped out any gains that eliminating the carbon tax gave anybody. So you're back to 0, and it made no sense. And you had an election for a new leader because, oh, well, taxes, low taxes, carbon tax, carbon tax. Guess what? That was it was just a slogan. It was a slur. It was not based on any foundational principle whatsoever that's going to better the lives of Canadians or anywhere else in the world for that matter. And then now we move to much less foreign aid. Well, that's another boondoggle of people and conservative governments around the world, and a lot of people. And just to give you a metaphor, I'm going to frame things in a different way. There was a movie made by, I think it was Pixar, a division of Disney, called Nemo, a little fish, cute little guy, wonderful little movie. And one of the scenes was in a harbor. And in this harbor, they had pillars and docks. And on those pillars would stand seagulls. As soon as somebody throws something into the water, could be food, could have been a wrapper, seagull doesn't know. What do they all do? Mine, 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 mine. So we have this odd belief created. It starts by perspective, perceptions, then beliefs. And unfortunately, with the creation of money, you can't take actions to experience what's actually going on, but you still have that perspective, perception, and that belief. And you don't create money. The government creates money. So giving money in foreign aid, you're helping other people. You're helping other countries develop so that you can have a relationship with them and develop relationships in the now, intermediate term, and the future, providing you subscribe to the time-space theory continuum, of course, which in all likelihood you'll find it's a fact of this density of this experience we're having right now. But the foreign aid falls into the next two sentences. Much less government spending and much less borrowing. Now, why do you care about much less government spending? It's not your money. You don't create the money. The government creates the money. And much less borrowing means, who are you borrowing from? You're not borrowing, the government is not borrowing from it. It creates money. So it can't borrow from itself because government spending is money that's created by government. So much less borrowing has nothing to do with government because the government's not borrowing from itself. It creates money, and therefore it creates a spending deficit or whatever the case may be. Now, one of the fallacies is, well, a government debt. We're going to go bankrupt. Well, if you create your own money, how are you ever going to go bankrupt? Number one. Number two, people say, well, the bonds, you've got all these bonds. Well, the Treasury of the Bank of Canada, the Treasury can just buy those bonds. And then there'll be no debt, so you have no issue with that. That's just a construct that's been created to manipulate you. That's all it's been. And you fall for it. It makes no sense. Once you use logic sequencing, not logic of the mind because you think, because that's subjective and arbitrary, but logical sequencing, which is a different way of looking at things, and in a somewhat sort of way is referred to as critical thinking, per se, but still that's much more critical than critical thinking. Once you understand logical sequencing, then you'll understand the patterns that are present, and you can actually put them in order to better understand and go from a position of judgment, because judgment serves nobody but the ego mind, and flow into understanding. Understanding provides calmness because you understand what's going on. So this is what's really at play here. So I'm going to bring up a couple other things. Oh, frig, it's not going to work. Let's try this and see if this works. There we go. Okay, so now we can bring up a few things. So we're going to start here. A common myth of the conservative people, neoliberalist way of thinking, started with Milton Friedman and Hayek, I forget his first name, but Hayek was his last name. And it was proposed and firmly entrenched in policy and government by Reagan and Thatcher. And every Western democracy around the world. And this has created the problem around the world of affordability. The myth, banks lend out deposits. No, banks do not lend out deposits. Banks create deposits when they lend. Okay, so number two. What's number two? The obsession with balanced budgets. Balanced budgets boost this is historical data we're sequencing here. Balanced budgets just boost private fortunes while public investment falls. And so what do I mean by that? Well, the rentier class. And what class is that? That are the people that sit at home, investment income based on investments in property, rental income, stocks and bonds, dividends and appreciation, inflation. Of the inflation creates a lot of this asset wealth, and that's where we're looking from, or that's where anybody with being pragmatic should be casting an eye at. And another factor here, and everybody thinks, well, inflation's bad, but inflation, once it's done a different way, or a framework's created where it's dealt with in a different way, is not all that bad like everybody states. But the way in the neoliberalist application of supply and demand, which is a theory, and it was just a theory, originally started, I believe, in about 1791. And we have a situation here where fiat money is created now because you don't have the gold standard, which is a good thing. You didn't need the gold standard. It was just another thing that was a shackle on the human experience. So if you look at China fiat money creation, 5.7% average inflation rate. Look at the growth of GDP. Now, if you look on the right-hand side, we're using U.S. government spending and taxation and U.S. government surplus, 2.5, and then the average surplus, 2.7, and this is a post-World War II average. And you see a different graph, a different trend. And this is why China has leapfrogged the rest of the countries around the world because of their hybrid use of a fiat currency. And this is where the Western world has just been a foot in the mud, feet in the mud approach, because they don't understand how money is created, how it's used, and how it can definitely uplift the human experience. But that's where we're at. And these are the facts. You see it right here in front of you. Like, you know, you can argue back and forth all you want about less government, less spending, less borrowing, but that's absolute friggin' bullshit because the data proves otherwise. The reality that China is a threat now, second to overtake the Americans as the power in the world, is another reality that you've created because of your neoliberalist policies and way of thinking. And that's just the reality. You know, just come to terms with what's really going on. Now, Mario Zelaya Obviously, he's Canadian. Proud Canadian, exposing government BS. I donate millions to the CRA. Right. I donated millions. I made millions and paid a lot. I got no issue with that. That was in the past, not now. Don't make millions now, buddy. Made millions when a million was worth something. So here we have another guy, J.D. Vance. Guy, what is it, Jamal Giovanni? I think it's MP for the Conservatives. Like, this is another story that we got to discuss, and we're not going to discuss it here for the most part. And for the most part, he's not wrong. That's what Mario Zalala says. Well, Mario, you're just looking for something to tug on the emotional heartstrings of people, whether it has merit or not. It's opinion, because J.D. Vance, we can deconstruct that construct very easily. I might be doing a video on Giovanni, because he was a schoolmate and chummate of J.D. Vance, and this is where this is coming from, I believe. So we have a declining GDP capita. Ever since COVID, all major Western civilizations dropped 300% overall. So this is it just makes no sense. You're just rehashing crap and instead of being able to make something better for everybody, you're just dragging this stuff that was a natural effect of COVID-19 that affected every democracy around the world. And irrespective of the affordability factor, we still have a half-decent living standard and way of life still, compared to the way it was even in the 1800s overall. Now, where we have faltered, and this is where people don't get it, and I cannot stress this enough, where we have faltered is we have not built from the ground up. We've built from the top down. And what do I mean about that? You need to build all the people up from the bottom. This is where the flow of money's got to go, and the effort has to go to build up. You don't build a house without a solid foundation. And the people are the foundation of any democracy, any country, and it's not by the top down. Corporations have no moral compass. They only have an obligation to their directors to make money for them, to their shareholders to make money for them, and to promote deregulation, even if it's at the expense of the people, where it creates a toxic environment because you give up actual way of life of creating a clean environment, which is so important for the human biology. So you sacrifice the environment for profits. There has to be a different balance because it's all intertwined, and this is what people have to look back to in the present, because you have to be in the present to understand this, and this is where we're at. So I'm going to leave that with you. I'm going to say love and peace to everybody. Take care. Ciao for now. Thanks for watching. Canada, the U.S., two countries, totally different politics, but we share a border.